She walked into the range like any quiet woman, but one old tattoo turned her into a ghost the government swore never existed. She wasn't trying to stand out. If anything, Zaria Trenton had mastered the art of being overlooked. Loose charcoal hoodie, worn Levi's. The kind of old black sneakers you only wear when you don't expect to be seen. She parked her 10-year-old Subaru on the edge of the lot at Arizona Tactical and Range, just outside Glendale, and sat for a moment, watching a hawk circle in the hot, open sky. It was Saturday afternoon. She could have been anywhere else. A movie, a grocery run, home watching old westerns, but she needed the silence. Not the silence of a living room. The kind of silence that only comes when you put on ear protection, load up a magazine, and let the cracks of controlled gunfire push every bad memory out of your mind. Inside, it was cool and dry. The scent of oil, metal, and rubber mats hit her as soon as she stepped through the door. Zaria gave a polite nod to the young guy behind the counter, who barely glanced up from his phone. She signed in with the ease of a regular and made her way to lane 14, the furthest one on the right, tucked against the concrete wall. The other shooters barely noticed her. A couple of guys laughing about a game last night, a woman showing her boyfriend how to load a magazine backwards, two middle-aged men comparing scopes. But Zaria, she moved like clockwork, quiet, focused, no small talk. She set down her Glock 19, laid out 3 full mags, and adjusted the target downrange. She didn't flinch at the sound of shots from the next lane. She didn't look over when someone's rifle jammed 3 stalls down. She just loaded, aimed, fired, clean, measured, precise. Like this wasn't a hobby, but something deeper. But what no one else could have seen, not yet at least, was that when she lifted her arm to adjust her hearing protection, her sleeve slid up just enough to show the top curve of something that didn't match anything about her soft, quiet presence. A tattoo. Simple, faded, but unmistakable. An arrow piercing a coiled serpent, 4 notches beneath it. A circle around the whole thing, half burned away. That was when Commander Blake Rylance saw her. He had just finished correcting one of his students, some overeager kid trying to be Delta Force in a rented vest, and turned his head casually to scan the lanes, and froze. Blake Rylance had spent 20 years leading missions that never made headlines. 10 years with SEAL Team 6. He'd been in rooms most people didn't know existed, and he had seen that tattoo once a long time ago in the back of a hangar in Bahrain, where a woman who wasn't supposed to be there handed him intel that saved 20 American lives. And now it was here, on the arm of a woman holding a Glock with perfect stance and zero fanfare, like she was just another bored housewife killing time before Costco. He stared, then blinked, took a slow breath. "Hey, Vic," he muttered to the guy beside him. "You see that woman in lane 14? Vic looked over, shrugged. "Yeah. What about her?" Blake didn't answer. His mind was already 10 years back, scanning names, memories, lists of people who were never photographed, never acknowledged, never thanked. He stepped closer to the lanes, arms crossed, trying not to look obvious, watching her, watching the way she reloaded without hesitation, the way she checked her surroundings every few minutes, never long enough to be noticed, but just enough to be aware. This wasn't someone new to this. She was trained, not by some 2-week civilian course. This was deeper, and that tattoo. No one had that unless they were part of Operation Glass Veil, and Glass Veil had gone black before it ever even made it to paper. He had to know, but he also knew better than to walk up fast. He started to move toward her slowly, carefully, because something about her body language told him, push too hard and she'll vanish. Zaria didn't notice him at first, or maybe she did. She didn't turn her head, didn't flinch, didn't miss a beat in her rhythm. But behind the mirrored lenses of her eye protection, she tracked every footstep that got within 10 feet of her. And Commander Blake Rylance's boots? She'd heard them the second they stepped off the rubber mat. He stopped 2 lanes over, pretending to be watching a trainee struggle with a shotgun that was clearly too much for his arms, but his head was tilted, too still, too aware. Zaria let the slide on her Glock lock back and set the weapon down gently. She pulled off her ear protection and took a sip of water. Her eyes flicked toward the observation mirror just for a second, catching his reflection. White man, late 40s, short military haircut, posture like he never stopped carrying weight, hands calloused. He wasn't here for fun. She wiped her hands with a cloth and started packing up. Blake saw the movement and took a chance. He stepped a little closer, not too close, just enough to speak without shouting. "You shoot like you've done it for longer than a weekend class," he said, neutral tone, arms still crossed. Zarya didn't respond immediately, just zipped up her case. Then, "You watch everyone this close, or just me?" There was no heat in her voice, just a question, clean and pointed. Blake gave a half shrug. "Only when I see something I recognize." Zarya didn't answer. She slid her phone into her pocket and gave him a long, quiet look, one that measured things most people didn't realize they gave away. "You want to ask me something?" she said finally. Blake paused. "I saw your ink." She blinked once, nothing else moved. "I don't know what you think you saw," she said, "but that mark? Just an old piece, doesn't mean much anymore." Blake nodded slowly. "That symbol, arrow, serpent, 4 kills, circle burn. It wasn't public. It was tied to glass veil." Zarya's jaw set, but not hard. More like she was tired. Of people asking. Of people remembering. "I don't know what that is," she said. But the hesitation, barely a breath, was all he needed. "I was in Bahrain in 2011, he said. "SEAL team. We were boxed in. Intel came from someone we never saw again. We were told that person never existed. Just a shadow." Zarya picked up her bag and turned toward the exit. "Then maybe that's where you should leave it." Blake stepped in front of her gently but firmly, not blocking, just present. "I don't mean any harm. I'm just trying to understand. You look like you walked away from something the rest of us didn't survive." She looked up at him for the first time. Really looked. And for a split second, just a flicker, he saw it. That weight behind the eyes. That quiet knowledge of what it means to lose something you can't talk about. "You think you survived because of me?" she said. Blake opened his mouth, then closed it. "Don't thank me," she said, softer now. "Don't make this into something noble. You don't know what it cost." He didn't press. The moment hung between them, thick and quiet, like desert air before a storm. And then she walked past him. No dramatic exit, no last words, just the sound of her steps on concrete. Blake stood still for a long moment, watching her walk away. Then he turned and looked back at lane 14. Her target was still hanging, center mass, tight grouping. He stepped into the stall, looked down. A single spent casing was left behind, carefully placed on the bench, not dropped, not forgotten. Inside the casing, folded tight, was a piece of paper. His fingers tightened slightly as he opened it. Stop looking. Some files stay buried for a reason. Blake told himself to walk away, to let the past stay sealed where it belonged, to accept that maybe she had saved his team in Bahrain, and maybe that was all there was to it. But there was something about her voice, the way she didn't flinch, the way she knew exactly how much to say and how much to leave out. That kind of control, that only came from one place, field work, real missions, the kind where no one's coming to get you if things go wrong. So he didn't go home. He drove to a small diner off 67th Avenue, one of those 24-hour places that still had laminated menus and waitresses who called you hun. He parked in the back, ordered a black coffee he didn't want, and pulled out his tablet. He didn't search her tattoo. He already knew that would lead nowhere. Instead, he pulled up retired personnel logs. He combed through old Intel briefs from 2011 and 2012, whatever scraps were now declassified, names that had been redacted, operations that had been renamed, nothing on Zarya Trenton. But when he ran a facial match against archived photos taken by foreign media during the Fallujah standoff in early 2012, one image came back flagged. It wasn't even a clear photo, just a blurry face in the background of a crowd, half covered by a scarf, walking behind a burned-out building. The software had tagged it at 78% match probability. Zarya Trenton. There it was. Except there was no record of her ever being in Iraq. No deployment logs, no contractor badge, no NGO assignment, which meant she was working under something deep and dirty. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling tiles. "What the hell were you doing over there?" he muttered. Back in her small one-bedroom apartment in Peoria, Zarya sat on the edge of her couch, hands still, heart not. She had seen his face, recognized his name. Blake Rylance, not just a SEAL. The SEAL. The one who stayed behind when everyone else got pulled. The one who helped get that convoy out of the city while she was feeding false intel to keep the enemy distracted. She thought he'd died. She remembered hearing the comms cut out. She never expected to see his face again, especially not 20 minutes from her front door. She walked over to the sink, filled a glass with water, and stared out the window. The desert sun was fading into a soft, dusty gold. She'd spent the last decade building this life. Quiet, small, untouched. She worked at a local vet clinic, took night walks, read books at the park. No one asked questions. No one knew she still had nightmares so bad she sometimes woke up standing, fists clenched. And now here he was. Commander Rylance, digging, asking, stirring dirt she had buried so deep she could barely remember the sound of her own voice from back then. She opened a drawer beneath the TV and pulled out a photo, creased, faded, and half-ripped. It showed her in desert camo, sitting on the back of a truck with 4 other people. None of them smiled. They didn't need to. They'd just walked out of hell. She slid the photo back in, locked the drawer, and turned on the TV to drown the noise in her head. Meanwhile, Blake made a decision. He got in his truck and drove back toward Peoria. He wasn't going to follow her, wasn't going to knock on her door. But he needed to understand why. Why someone like her had vanished. Why someone with that kind of tactical training was living like a ghost. He didn't know if it was guilt or fear or something worse. All he knew was this. If she was involved in Glass Vale, and if she was in Fallujah in 2012, then she wasn't just some intel runner. She was part of something much bigger. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't supposed to have lived long enough to find her again. But the more he dug, the more it became clear. She hadn't just left the field. She had run from something no one dared speak about. The next morning, Zarya drove to work like nothing had happened. She parked behind the clinic on West Olive and let herself in through the back door, just as she always did. She fed the cats in recovery, checked on the sedated terrier from last night's surgery, and smiled faintly when Dr. Holcomb made his usual comment about her being more reliable than the clock on the wall. No one knew. No one in that building could have guessed that less than 24 hours ago, someone had spoken her name like a threat wrapped in curiosity. That name, Annika Reese, was supposed to be dead. She hadn't heard it in almost 9 years. Not since the day she shredded her ID, burned every trace of her field reports, and walked away. But she knew Blake would keep digging. SEALs were built that way. Trained to chase ghosts until they got an answer, or a body. She stared at herself in the mirror above the clinic sink. Zarya Trenton, calm, steady, kind, lived alone, volunteered at the shelter twice a month, went to church on Easter. But before Zarya, there was Annika Reese, field asset for the Department of Strategic Deployment, a branch so classified it didn't even have a mailbox. She had gone where diplomats wouldn't, carried things couriers wouldn't touch, taken lives for people who never said thank you. And in Fallujah, she did something that still made her hands tremble if she thought about it too long. So she didn't. Meanwhile, Blake sat on a bench at Saguaro Ranch Park, his laptop open, earbuds in, sipping terrible gas station coffee. He'd hit walls for the past 10 hours. Everything related to Glass Vale was sealed beyond clearance, even his. But one name kept showing up in adjacent missions, always redacted, always labeled off-record asset. And in one blurry scan from a debrief transcript, the name Reese had slipped through before someone had blacked it out. Blake leaned back, whispered the name out loud. Annika Reese. He didn't know why it sent a chill through him, but he remembered a rumor, a story passed between teams like Campfire Legend. There was once a woman in the field who could move through cities like smoke. She'd walk into compounds, walk out without a scratch, left no prints, no trails. The CIA never confirmed it. The Army said she didn't exist. But the SEALs, they called her Red Wire, because when she showed up, something was about to blow. Zarya was closing up the clinic when she saw the man leaning against the brick wall near the exit. Not close, not threatening, just there. Blake Rylance. He didn't speak until she got within earshot. "I know your name's not Zarya," he said quietly. She sighed through her nose, didn't stop walking. "I'm not here to expose you," he added quickly, "or report you. Hell, I doubt anyone still has your file. She paused, keys in hand. I walked away for a reason, she said without turning. I believe you. She turned slowly to face him. No fear in her eyes, just fatigue. You were supposed to die that day in Fallujah, she said. Blake nodded once. I know. You weren't my assignment. But your unit was. You weren't meant to make it out. He held her gaze. So why did we? Zaria's jaw clenched. Because I changed the plan, she said. And people died for it. People on my side, people who trusted me. Blake was silent. I wasn't a hero, she added, voice lower now. I was a weapon. And one day I looked in the mirror and couldn't tell if I was pointing in the right direction anymore. Blake swallowed. I needed to know, he said. Because the woman who saved us, she disappeared, and I think the people who tried to bury her story did it for a reason. Zaria looked past him toward the street. There's a reason I never told anyone. Never came forward. You open that door, Commander. You better be ready for what comes through it. But Blake had already stepped too far to turn back, because if what she said was true, then Glass Veil wasn't just a mission, it was a cover-up. The sound of gravel crunching under tires always made her nervous. Even now, sitting behind the wheel of her Subaru on a back road near Lake Pleasant, Zaria couldn't help checking the rearview mirror every few minutes. Old habits, ones she couldn't unlearn, even after 9 years. Blake had asked to meet somewhere private, not to threaten, not to expose, just to listen. So she chose the Overlook. High ground, one way in, one way out. He pulled up 10 minutes late, stepping out of his truck with both hands visible. Respectful. Zaria stayed seated until he came within a few feet, then got out slowly. No phones, she said. Leave it in the car. He nodded and walked back to toss it on the passenger seat. Now talk, she said. Blake took a breath. You said your team wasn't supposed to make it out, that your assignment changed. Zaria looked out over the water, wind tugging at the edges of her hoodie. Glass Veil wasn't about recovery, she said. It wasn't about information or hostages or any of the stuff they told the press after. It was retaliation. Blake's eyes narrowed. We weren't sent to defuse anything. We were sent to destabilize it. Set off a chain reaction that'd justify further presence. Contractors, money, equipment, an entire war economy waiting to be fed. He stepped forward slightly. You're telling me the attack on our convoy was bait, she finished. Scripted, meant to provoke a response. You were never meant to survive it. None of you. Blake stood there, quiet. Zaria turned to him slowly. I was supposed to leak your location, make it look like local intel slipped, then vanish. He didn't move. But something went wrong, she continued. You had civilians with you, locals, a translator's family, a kid. They weren't in the initial report. That wasn't part of the deal. I remember the boy, Blake said quietly. He had a bandage around his head, wouldn't let go of his sister's hand. Zaria nodded. I saw them, and I couldn't do it. I pulled your GPS ping, rerouted the drone support, and I lied to my handler. I gave you an opening. That opening saved 15 lives, Blake said. No, Zaria said. It cost 5 of mine. She turned away again. My extraction team was ambushed 30 minutes later. They knew I flipped the script. Only one made it out. Me. Blake didn't try to apologize. He knew better. I buried Anika Reese that night, she said. Took a dead contact's identity. Slipped across the border using papers I wasn't supposed to have. Came back to the States like a ghost. New name, new story. And every year I wonder if someone's going to come knocking. She looked at him then, eyes tired but firm. So don't thank me. Don't say I was brave. I didn't do it for you. Blake shook his head. Doesn't matter why you did it, just that you did. Zaria gave a bitter half smile. They'll say you're compromised now, just for talking to me. I don't care. You should. They stood in silence for a long moment, wind pushing dust across the pavement. Finally, Blake said, You ever think about coming back, telling your story? Zaria laughed softly. Who would listen? There's no footage, no witnesses, just a scarred-up woman with a faded tattoo and a dead past. I would, he said. She looked at him, surprised. There's still a few of us who care what the truth costs, Blake said, even if it's inconvenient. Zarya didn't speak, just turned back to the view, and for the first time in years, she felt the grip of her old life loosen just a little. But if the truth was coming out, someone out there would want it buried again, and this time, they'd make sure she stayed buried with it. 2 days passed. Zarya didn't hear from Blake, no messages, no unmarked cars, no calls from old numbers she hoped were dead. But she felt it, that old instinct, a quiet shift in the air, the kind you don't explain, you just know. It started when she saw the same white SUV parked across from the vet clinic 2 mornings in a row. Then a guy came in with a dog that didn't need to be there, asking too many questions, looking around like he wasn't really looking at anything. And when she got home that night, her mailbox was open. She never left it open. There was nothing inside. But the message was clear. We see you. Blake was at home when his front gate camera went black, just a flicker, barely a second. But when it came back on, someone had left an envelope tucked into the iron bars. No address, no stamp, just his name typed in all caps. Inside, a photo. Zarya, at the range. Below it, 1 sentence. She talks, she disappears. He stared at it for a long time. He'd seen these tactics before. Quiet threats, no fingerprints, just pressure. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then dialed her burner number. No answer. So he drove. Zarya was already moving when he pulled up to her apartment. She had a backpack slung over one shoulder, her car keys in her hand. She saw him and didn't flinch, just walked straight to his truck. "Glove box," she said as she climbed in. "There's a flash drive. If anything happens to me, send it to this address." She handed him a slip of paper. Blake didn't ask questions. He started driving. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere I can think." An hour later, they were parked behind an old diner in Tonopah, nowhere near cameras, signals, or anyone who would care what they talked about. Zarya pulled her legs up onto the seat, her hoodie sleeves covering her hands. "I never told you why I really disappeared," she said. Blake waited. Glass Veil wasn't just about weapons. It wasn't just some mission gone wrong. She paused, watching his face. It was a cleanup. Blake frowned. There was an asset, a man the agency lost control of. Deep cover, he flipped, sold intel, triggered retaliation strikes. Kids died, families vanished. And when it got out, they needed someone to take the fall. She looked away. They chose me. Blake's hands tightened around the wheel. They framed it as treason, said I leaked the files. I had 12 hours to disappear, or they'd use me to close the book, permanently. She shook her head slowly. I never betrayed anyone. I did exactly what they trained me to do, and when it got ugly, they needed a ghost to blame. Why haven't you told anyone? Blake asked. Gone public? Zarya turned to him. You think I'd make it to the press? You think the same system that let this happen would suddenly protect me? He didn't answer. She opened the glove box and pulled out the flash drive. There's footage on here, copies of internal files, stuff I wasn't supposed to have. I took it the night I ran. She looked at him. If I go missing, don't go to the news. Don't run to a senator. You get it to a man named Glenn Ruiz. He's in Santa Fe, used to run logistics for the agency. He knows who I am, and he owes me. Blake took the drive, stared at it. You trust me with this? Zarya's voice dropped. I don't trust anyone, but you're the only one who's still breathing that knows the truth. But before they could decide what to do next, headlights swept across the rear of the diner, and Zarya knew, without even turning, that they were out of time. Zarya didn't panic. She lowered herself slowly in the passenger seat, reached for the backpack between her feet, and unzipped the front pocket. Inside was a compact pistol, 2 spare mags, and a prepaid phone. She handed the phone to Blake. If we get separated, call Ruiz. The number's saved. Blake glanced at the rearview mirror. 3 cars, all dark, no plates, no headlights, until they were right on top of them. They're not here to talk, Zarya said quietly. He shifted into drive. You ready? Zarya looked him dead in the eyes. I've been ready for 9 years. They peeled out the back lot, tires spitting gravel as the first car tried to box them in. Blake took a hard left down an unlit service road, swerving to avoid a dumpster. Zarya didn't flinch. She kept her hand on the backpack, breathing slow, eyes scanning the dark. After 2 minutes of tight turns and sudden drops in terrain, they made it to a back highway. Nothing around but desert and distant lights. The cars didn't follow, for now. They checked into a roadside motel outside Quartzsite, using fake names and cash. Inside the room, Zarya paced while Blake watched through the curtain. "They'll try again," she said. "I know. They don't miss twice." Blake turned. "Then we hit first." Zarya sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbing her face. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Tired of running, of hiding, of acting like I didn't do the right thing. I did." Blake nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time to stop hiding." She looked up at him, something shifting in her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I believe someone out there needs to hear the truth, and you're the only one left who can say it." She stood, walked to the desk, pulled out the flash drive and stared at it. "It's not just about me. If this gets out, careers die. Programs get shut down. Millions in black budgets disappear. You think they'll let that happen?" Blake stepped closer. "You're right. They'll fight like hell. But this time, they don't get to decide how the story ends." Zarya breathed out slowly. Then she grabbed her phone, dialed. "Glenn, it's me. No, I'm not dead. Listen, I need you to meet us, tomorrow. You know where." She hung up. "You trust him?" Blake asked. "No, but he's scared. And scared men are the only ones who talk when it matters." The next morning, they drove through the desert until they hit a shuttered gas station 30 miles out from the Colorado River. Glenn Ruiz was already there, older, thinner. But the moment he saw Zarya, his face dropped. "You're supposed to be—" "Yeah," she cut him off. "But I'm not. And now I need you to do the thing you never had the guts to do back then." Glenn glanced at Blake. She held out the flash drive. "This is everything. Fallujah, Glass Veil, the real logs, the setup. If anything happens to me before it hits the press, it's on your head." Glenn hesitated. "You know what they'll do to me?" "You should have thought about that before you cashed your pension," she snapped. He took the drive. Zarya stepped back. "If you run, I'll know. If you stall, I'll know. You get it out. All of it." He nodded once, then left. Blake and Zarya stood in the sun for a long moment. "It's done," she said. "For now." She looked at him. "You still want to know why I saved you?" He didn't speak. She smiled, barely. "Because you weren't the type to walk away from a mess. I saw that. Even then." Blake looked down. "What happens next?" Zarya shrugged. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything." Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out a second flash drive, and handed it to him. "In case Ruiz gets scared again." He took it. Their eyes met, soldier to soldier. Not for glory, not for forgiveness, but because they both understood what truth costs. And sometimes, the people who vanish are the only ones who can save what's left behind. If this story hits something in you, don't let it sit. Share it. Talk about it. We all know someone who's kept quiet for too long. Maybe it's time to ask what they've been carrying and what we're willing to hear.